From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
64 years ago, atom bombs rained down on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Upon seeing such horror and devastation, people throughout the world thought such carnage must never happen again.
On the 64th anniversary of the U.S. atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon issues an urgent call for disarmament. Thousands of nuclear weapons remain. The U.S. and Russia alone have enough nuclear warheads to launch the equivalent of 100,000 Hiroshimas in just 12 minutes. We'll speak with nuclear physicist and disarmament activist Pervez Hoodbhoy of Pakistan, peace activist Frida Berrigan, and Daniel Ellsberg, the whistleblower who leaked the Pentagon Papers. Over the next year, he'll release regular installments of his insider's memoir of the nuclear era. The Internet book is called The American Doomsday Machine. Then crackdown in Iran, a mass trial of reformers and protesters continues into a second week. We'll speak with leading Iranian dissident and journalist Akbar Ganji. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The nation's unemployment rate fell slightly last month, but largely because so many people dropped out of the hunt for work, ceasing to be considered unemployed by the government. The official unemployment rate fell from 9.5 to 9.4%, but economists project the real unemployment rate to be 16.3%. On Friday, President Obama spoke to reporters after the release of the jobs figures.
This morning, we received additional signs that the worst may be behind us. Though we lost 247,000 jobs in July, that was nearly 200,000 fewer jobs lost than in June, and far fewer than the nearly 700,000 jobs a month that we were losing at the beginning of the year. Today, we're pointed in the right direction. We're losing jobs at less than half the rate we were when I took office. We've pulled the financial system back from the brink, and a rising market is restoring value to those 401ks that are the foundation of a secure retirement.
The Los Angeles Times reports Attorney General Eric Holder's poised to appoint a criminal prosecutor to investigate alleged CIA abuses committed during the interrogation of prisoners. A senior Justice Department official said Holder envisioned an inquiry that would be narrow in scope, focusing on whether people went beyond the techniques that were authorized in Bush administration memos. The New York Times has revealed President Bush's Treasury Secretary, Henry Paulson, frequently spoke to the CEO of his former company, Goldman Sachs, as the federal government was deciding whether to bail out the failed insurance giant AIG. According to a copy of his calendar, Paulson spoke with Lloyd Blankfein, Goldman's chief executive, 24 times during the week of the AIG bailout last September. On September 17th, Paulson and Blankfein spoke 5 times. The government eventually agreed to lend $85 billion to AIG, which used the money to pay off Goldman Sachs and other big banks that were financially threatened by AIG's potential collapse. Paulson served as Goldman Sachs CEO prior to becoming Treasury Secretary. In other banking news, the Financial Times reports U.S. banks stand to collect a record $38 billion in fees for customer overdrafts this year. The bulk of the fees will be paid by the most financially stretched consumers. At Bank of America, a customer overdrawn by as little as $6 could trigger a $35 penalty. If the customer does not realize they have a negative balance and continues spending, they could incur that fee as many as 10 times in a single day for a total of $350. The Nation magazine reports the Obama administration's extended a contract with the company formerly known as Blackwater for more than $20 million for security services in Iraq. Since President Barack Obama took office in January, the State Department has contracted with Blackwater for more than $174 million in security services alone in Iraq and Afghanistan, and tens of millions more in aviation services. The latest contract was extended just days before 2 former Blackwater employees alleged in sworn statements filed in federal court that the company's owner, Eric Prince, views himself as a Christian crusader tasked with eliminating Muslims and the Islamic faith from the globe. Sonia Sotomayor has been sworn in as the 111th Supreme Court Justice, becoming the first Latina justice and only the third woman to sit on the High Court. Chief Justice John Roberts administered the oath. Sotomayor took the oath of office twice, first at a private ceremony and then at this brief televised event attended by her friends and family.
I, Sonia Sotomayor, do solemnly swear
I, Sonia Sotomayor, do solemnly swear
that I will administer justice without respect to persons
that I will administer justice without respect to persons
and do equal right to the poor and to the rich,
and do equal right to the poor and to the rich,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me
all of the duties incumbent upon me
as Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States,
as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States,
under the Constitution and laws of the United States.
under the Constitution and laws of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations and welcome to the court.
In news from Afghanistan, 50 major Afghan drug traffickers with ties to the Taliban have been placed on a Pentagon target list to be captured or assassinated. The move marks a dramatic change to the U.S. counter-narcotics strategy in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, the top commander in Afghanistan has told the Wall Street Journal the Taliban have gained the upper hand in Afghanistan as part of a new strategy. General Stanley McChrystal said the U.S. will increase the number of troops in heavily populated areas like the southern city of Kandahar. McChrystal warned U.S. casualties will remain high for months to come. In Pakistan, U.S. and Pakistani officials say they believe Baitullah Masood has died in a U.S. drone strike. Masood was the head of the Pakistan Taliban and had been blamed for numerous attacks inside Pakistan, including the assassination of former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto. In Iraq, at least 40 people have died and another 200 were injured in a series of bomb blasts earlier today. In the deadliest incident, 2 truck bombs exploded in a Shia village near the northern city of Mosul, killing at least 23 people and injuring around 130. 35 houses were leveled in the blasts. Meanwhile, Iraqi authorities have arrested a British contractor accused of murdering 2 colleagues in the Green Zone in Baghdad. The suspected gunman, Daniel Fitzsimmons, could be the first Westerner to face an Iraqi trial on murder charges since the security pact lifted the immunity that had been enjoyed by foreign contractors for most of the war. Honduras' de facto ruler said Sunday they had resolved a disagreement with the Organization of American States over a visit to the Central American country to discuss its political crisis. The government running Honduras since a coup in June had told OAS chief Jose Miguel Insulza to stay away because of his support for the ousted president Manuel Zelaya. But it later reversed course and said Insulza could come on a mission with Latin American foreign ministers in the coming weeks. The Washington-based OAS suspended Honduras over the coup, the first suspension of a member state since Cuba in 1962. Nearly 1 million people have been evacuated from China's eastern coastal provinces as a typhoon struck the mainland, toppling houses and flooding villages. The storm dumped more than 80 inches of rain on parts of Taiwan, triggering the island's worst flooding in 50 years. Israeli warplanes bombed a tunnel under the Gaza Strip border with Egypt earlier today, the first such attack in almost 2 months. There were no immediate reports of casualties from the pre-dawn raid. The Israeli military said the raid was launched in response to Sunday's mortar and rocket attacks from Gaza against Israel. President Obama is in Mexico for a 2-day summit with Mexican President Felipe Calderón and Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Several Mexican, U.S., and Canadian troops are holding an alternate summit to discuss the 15 years of NAFTA's economic failures. NAFTA has been criticized for putting small Mexican farmers out of business and spurring waves of immigration to the U.S., as well as causing American jobs to move overseas. This is Dolores Rojas of Oxfam.
Es hora de que el presidente Obama cumpla con las promesas que le arrancaron sus electores.
It's time for President Obama to fulfill the promises he made to his electorate. He promised while campaigning and as president to renegotiate NAFTA. At this first summit, he ought to start keeping his promise.
El presidente Calderón debe cumplir el
Mexican
compromiso
President
firmado
Felipe
por su
Calderón should fulfill the
predecesor
commitment
en el
signed by his
Acuerdo Nacional para el
predecessor in the
Campo,
National Rural
debe
Agreement to
negociar
renegotiate
dicho
said
tratado.
treaty.
El primer ministro Harper debe también atender
Canadian
la
Prime
demanda
Minister
del
Harper
Comité
should
del
also address the
Parlamento,
demands of
así
the
como del
Parliamentary
creciente
Committee and of a
número de
growing number of
ciudadanos y
citizens and organizations in his
en el
country
mismo
who
sentido.
share that sentiment as well.
And the folk musician and archivist Mike Seeger has died at the age of 75. He was the founder of the band New Lost City Ramblers. He was the half-brother of folk legend Pete Seeger. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!